about that ride is called A Hole in the Wind. Since then, distance cycling has become a passion, but it was my background in climate science that led me to the original cross-country trek. I had spent 25 years working for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, including 3 years as director of the UN Global Climate Observing System in Geneva, Switzerland. April 2014 wasn't my first Keystone demonstration either. Back when I worked in climate science, our job was to lay out the facts, to describe how climate was changing and what was causing it. I didn't advocate for any policy actions, either publicly or as a private citizen. Yet the human fingerprint on climate was unmistakable. In particular, the burning of fossil fuels. I had been part of the large scientific community that highlighted climate change as a problem. Now, I wanted to be part of the solution. In the autumn of 2011, after returning from my retirement ride, I helped carry a giant plastic pipeline around the White House in a march along with 15,000 others in a Keystone protest. Luminaries of the climate movement like activist Bill McKibben of 350.org and NASA climate scientist James Hansen spoke to the gathered crowd. The Cowboys and Indians procession was different than other climate demonstrations. It wasn't a bunch of stereotypical environmentalists. It harkened back to the American lore of the frontier, transcending the usual red state-blue state divide. The earlier political pushback had been furious. During the 2012 presidential campaign, Mitt Romney stated, "I will build that pipeline if I have to myself." But there were hints that these riders from the West might be making a difference. Standing out in a suit and tie on a hot April day, I saw John Podesta, then in the Obama administration, walking along with the march. Some days later, Jane Klebe, one of the march organizers from the group Bold, Nebraska, got an email from the White House literally saying, "You've got our attention." Action was not immediate, but it came. The new Republican Congress in 2015 passed, as one of its first actions, a bill that would require approval of the Keystone XL pipeline. President Obama vetoed it. Then later that year, on November 6th, he rejected the permit that the Keystone pipeline would need to cross the border from Canada. That decision would prove to be short-lived. 4 days after his 2017 inauguration, President Trump signed an order restoring permits for the Keystone pipeline. Since the initial permit application from TransCanada in 2008, the effort to get this oil out of the ground has been unremitting. Where did this relentless pressure come from? I wanted to find out. As I've discovered since my first cross-country ride, things look different from a bicycle seat. Gradually, the idea for the new bike journey began to take shape. I would start in the oil sands of northern Alberta, Canada, where the Keystone oil would come from. Later, I would return to visit Hardisty, the place where the pipeline would begin. From there, I would ride to another oil frontier, this one in the States. An oil field in western North Dakota has been a center of hydraulic fracturing or fracking, technology that has made the United States the leading oil producer in the world. This oil field is known as the Bakken. Oil production in the Bakken was booming at the very depths of the 2008 and 9 recession. The two deposits, the oil sands and the Bakken, were laid down by the same shallow sea that spread across the center of the continent millions of years ago. I would ride out of the deep forest of Canada's Northlands and across the Great Plains that Canada and the United States share, on a voyage across that ancient ocean. Chapter 1. The Takeoff Roll. As we taxied onto the bumpy runway at Fort McMurray Airport, Matt instructed me to put on the headphones and mic so I could talk with him over the roar of the engine. A pungent whiff of exhaust floated above the rows of gauges. In the distance, lightning flashed out of the bottom of a cloud. "See that?" he said. "Another hour and I would have had to scrub on you." I wasn't quite sure whether to thank him or not. Our little Cessna was taking off into the deep forest of northern Alberta, roughly the same latitude as central Hudson Bay. At this time of year, days last for 18 hours and never really recede into night. Fort McMurray was the staging area and jumping-off point for the bicycle journey. I'd ride through this boreal forest and prairie south to the United States, passing over what had been the
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.